So, once again, we hit a crossroads. Lots of things that we can do. At this point, we hit a crossroads before, and we ended up going down this road to do some development on what kind of characters will be played. Having this, we have some more context for other things to do. Because, like, we could do some additional world building, actually set things down, not literally on maps because this is a text document, but set things down, talk about the actual physical places. We have a little bit of stuff, right? We could also do some more development on the Ascendant Evils, right? Lay down some more information about them. Could talk about some of the lesser things out there. Any number of directions to go. It is wise, incidentally, not to focus on one thing for too long. Right? If you hyper-focus, one of the things to realize is that whenever we do something in one direction, we might need to change something in another direction. And if you've overdeveloped one direction, you might be less willing to rescind what you have made. Plus, the context that you've developed might become stifling, right? We have a bit of context for other things that we're going to put in here. So, well, sure. Let's talk about this. Okay, so, Principality. We have a decayed nobility, right? A decayed power within the upper echelon. One way that might convey an idea of this is that the prince is only 13 years old. Gained power in a coup d'etat. Gain power in a coup d'etat from the regents, making the prince one of the few rulers to have gained power by usurping his or her own throne. I think that says a lot about the world, right there. Now, for the nobility, for dukes who do not directly administrate much land, rather having vassal lords to do that for them, and each one has number earls in control of specific districts of their holdings. I don't know how many, right? But it's some number. Greater than 1. Less than 100. Carry the 2. Landforms. Around settlements and civilizations, mostly grasslands and hills, if the land hasn't been converted to agriculture or pastoralism. Pastoralism. How do you spell okay, so spellcheck just doesn't know that pastoralism is actually a word. Fair enough. Beyond that, it becomes a mix of forestry, more broken terrain, uneven hills, wetlands, etc. Rivers sometimes host horrors of the deep who have adapted to breathing fresh water. Most cities and towns lie on rivers. That is a note of reality, incidentally. Most medieval cities and towns did lie on rivers, because if you're going to be transiting merchantable cargoes, you want to carry a lot of them, and it's easier to do that by water. Well, there needs... The mandatory mountain range runs through a portion of it. There's always a mountain range. There has to be a mountain range. Historic fantasy, there's always a mountain range. It's just a rule. It's how it works. Probably not volcanic. Cultural notes. What can we say about the culture? Xenophobic, because of course they're xenophobic. Not so much to kill strangers, but they will actively shun strangers, with merchants sometimes not bothering to negotiate with traders or with consumers. Because of course they're xenophobic. They have to be xenophobic. Dark fantasy. It's a rule. But we're looking for something more unique. You know, I'm going to import something from certain American nations. Strict gender roles, but not strictly tied to gender. Someone crossing gender roles will wear the garb of the other gender. This is not considered wrong or bizarre, though it is unusual and worthy of note. This to answer the statement of, oh, this is, you know, a medieval society, why would women be in the... Yeah, they're here. The gender role can be reassigned without reassigning the gender. Other cultural notes. Oh! Witchcraft is not a religious practice. Witches are clerical class, but not deemed priests. They are a spiritual practice, but a professional one. Witches are not directly feared, but witchcraft used to perform a crime is deemed sorcery and worsens the punishment. Those witches deemed especially, or deemed to be doing especially good works, are called theurgists. I have a video on my YouTube. If you scroll down, well, okay, if you're watching this on my YouTube, then you might already know this. But if you're watching this on Twitch, if you scroll down, you'll find a link to my YouTube. And I have a video on medieval perspectives on witches, which this actually aligns to. The medieval era did not bring you any witch hunts. Witches were not feared. Using witchcraft to commit a crime made the crime much worse, but otherwise it was just a thing. And if you're somebody, if you're a cunning man who would bring fertility to couples, bring fertility to lands, mend the sick, nobody would complain. But while we are on the subject of clerisy, the major faith is that of the god kings, of the royal gods. God king means something else from what I am going for. The royal gods are divine rulers. They rule over regions with a high king over them, ruling over the world in a divine feudal system. The clerics are each devoted to a specific god king or royal god, acting as vassals and are called vassal priests. I am more or less making this up as I go along, and if anybody in chat is paying attention and wants to say, no, that's stupid, please do so, because this is me typing at the seat of my pants. Although devoted to a specific god king, the traits of the cleric will be the same regardless. The god king of the principality is named. We'll just put that there. We don't know enough about the national character to be able to say, okay, this is what the god would look like. The nation is not actively at war, but is passively at war, fighting border skirmishes for no real reason other than to push the boundaries without actively starting wars. Within limits, it is legal for one lord of the principality to commit to war with another. War's gonna happen. The nation values cunning. It is not an insult to be called cunning. Craftiness is a virtue. Sly foxes. To be called a sly fox is a compliment, even if it means you need to be hunted down as a fox. This actually also emulates medieval society. The term cunning didn't take on a negative connotation until the Renaissance. Cunning in the medieval era was viewed as basically a good thing, and the only way that it would be insulting to be called cunning is if you really didn't think you were cunning, in which case you weren't really being insulted, you were just being given a trait that you did not actually possess. So ironically, these unique features that I've given to this culture would not actually have been unique in the medieval world. But we're not playing in the medieval world, we're playing in the D&D world, and these traits are unique in the D&D world. Well, okay, the gender role thing it would be really unique in the D&D world, or in the fantasy world, and the actual medieval world. And in fantasy worlds, not actually as unique. Speaking, easy. Twitch streamer, word good. The job must needs yes. I want to have some other unique thing, something that really gives the nation some character. The cunning thing gives the nation character. The not actively at war thing, but passively at war, doesn't really give it a character, although it does kind of stem out of the whole cunning thing, right? They're gobbling up land without actually going to war. That kind of goes hand in hand with the cunning thing. I want something that really gives them like something that marks character in the people. Well, let's head down another. We don't really know anything about the history of the setting. This is just going to be starter stuff, but I'm going to kind of start it off with like the history of France, because France actually has a really interesting history, right? Formerly part of Old Empire. We'll name it later. When Old Empire collapsed, the principality that also still has no name inherited some of the law of that empire. Let's actually drop that down there and say the Old Empire took it from a native folk, the ethnicity still existing in the nation. Members of the Old Empire ethnicity still remain in the principality. Because they might all be humans, but they still have ethnicities, and I think it would be remiss to ignore ethnic concerns, especially since they marked medieval history. In England for a long time, whether you were Saxon or Norman or whatever else, that made a lot of difference. The principality under the descendants of Old Empire. Descendants is not spelled that way. Lost the land to invaders from the east, who aren't actually Franks, but is it spelled with? Yeah, okay, it's spelled with C. Who aren't actually Franks, but fill the role. They, in turn, lost it to people from the north, totally not Normans. This is kind of a flip on it. In fact, I might shift the Franks to before the Old Empire because that's the kind of the way it worked. But you know, I'm liking this setup. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna flip it around a bit. They lost. The native ethnicity lost control of the nation to invaders from the east, who aren't actually Franks but fill the role. Those were then conquered by the Old Empire. Note, ethnicities, natives, not Franks, not Romans, not Normans. Legends abound about dragons, which don't actually exist. These dragons are the creatures of royalty, and the prince's coat of arms, or the prince's heraldry, let's just say, includes dragons. Dragon stories generally give them absurd features and make them overwhelmingly powerful. Despite this, in these stories, usually some ancestor of the current prince overcame the obstacle, possibly without effort, because that's the way it works. This actually comes from one theory of how the term Pendragon came into being, because Roman standards oftentimes had draconic imagery on them. It was thought that it might have been a reference to authority on the battlefield. I don't think this theory actually holds a lot of weight in modern scholarship, but that doesn't make it any less awesome. Probably want to have a few notes about neighbors. Let's just drop below that. Neighbors. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day in the neighborhood. You be mine. I will conquer you. Alright, so the north is a desert region where a desolate people, not Normans, travel as nomads. They are noted for having very little and being quite willing to take it from others. Though the reality is there are only a few with a spirit of conquest. To the northwest, C. We'll just leave it at that for now. To the south is another C. Perfectly fine like that. The mandatory mountain range makes access to or from the land's west difficult. To the east is the Not Web of Faith. Another World of Darkness reference there for you. Where several holy sites are contested in a way totally not like the Crusades. I think that kind of works out. It's very, very rough, still. Now we have, not a map, but a rough idea of the world all around. So I think that will, I mean, yes, there's plenty of stuff left to do here, but I think in terms of like development at this stage, I think that that is sufficient. And again, you don't want to do too much development in any single direction at one time, right? You want to go to other things, develop other things, build the context of what you're doing. And you'll know that you're doing well when these contexts start really connecting to each other and you start really relying on them. Like knowing that one of the clerical subclasses will be vassal priest. So again, we return to the crossroads. What do we want to do? So here's something that I actually have not really done in D&D. Well, in 5th Ed D&D. Okay, let's face it, I haven't done much in 5th Ed D&D. But here's something that I have not done. I have not actually created a monster. So, let us... Why did you do that? Let us work on that. Let us make a unicorn, the way mythology originally intended. Now, to do this, I am going to need to open up a file. Creating a monster. Size. Alright. We first need to detail size, so let's just check out 5th Ed, see if they have stats on a horse. Riding horse. It works. Large. Riding horse is large. This will be a monstrosity. We already know that. Alright, now let's check out. Yeah, we've done type. Alignment. unaligned. That's how it's parsed, right? Yep. Okay. Ability scores and modifiers. Let's look at not the strength, dex, con, int, whiz, cha, 18, 4, 12, plus 1, 13, plus 1, 2, minus 4. I never did like the fact that all animals have, like, really, really low intelligence. I mean, I understand what they're going with on that, it doesn't parse in my head. Plus 1, minus 7, minus 2. We will bring that down to 5, make it minus 3. Anything else we want to change? Oh, we shall see. Expected challenge rating. See, Warhorse is CR 1/2. Just out of curiosity, let's look at the 5th Ed Unicorn and see what we got. 5. Okay, let's go with CR 5. Okay, so we gotta figure out an AC. Unicorns have an AC 12. Warhorses have an AC 11. These are going to be frenzied little fuckers. So I will say armor class 13. Okay, hit points. So hit dice are based on its size. Now that much. Ah, here we are. Hit dice by size. Large is a D10. And gets a +1 mod from con. So that's 6.5. What is the expected hit point range for a creature of CR5? 131 to 145. Well, if we gave it 20 hit dice, that would do it. How many hit dice does the unicorn have? 9. Hit points. I'll give it 10d10. Wait. 10d10 plus 10, which makes it 65 hit points. Damage vulnerabilities, resistances, and immunities. Unicorns are immune to poison because everything is freaking immune to poison. I'm not going to make these things immune to poison. Damage resistances. Go with bludgeoning and force. That's kind of an interesting combo, and it matches up to the idea that this thing barges through whatever the fuck it finds. Do we want to give it a vulnerability? Damage, vulnerability. Provisionally we'll say psychic. Its weak spot is its mind. Attack bonuses. Let's go ahead and just look here. 4, 8, 9, 10, there's a base proficiency bonus of +4. Strength attack is +8. How does that scale on the chart up here? Considerably higher. Considerably higher. Pafo. Alright. And for damage. This thing has a considerably higher attack bonus. We might want to bring down the damage rate. Damage per round, 33 to 38. Bring it down a bit. Say attack damage. Oh, what do we have? I mean, this is basically the medieval concept of the unicorn, which was a feral monstrosity whose principal feature, and the feature for which it was famed and revered, was that it could not be tamed. So we want it to, like, be able to pummel a lot. And actually, thinking about it, let me see if there is an equivalent. Alright. Go ahead and give it Reckless. The unicorn, at the start of its turn, the unicorn can claim advantage on all attacks it makes, but all attacks on it that round will also gain advantage. And 2 per round. We make it 2 attacks per round. Basically, it can be attack plus bonus. No, just call it 2 per round, come to think of it, because that does happen. We can actually bring down the damage and still maintain the damage per round that they are suggesting, which is otherwise very, very high. Okay, so d6 plus strength, which actually does give it the DPS suggested, or DP damage per round suggested. Oh, hello, Protty. How are you doing? Sorry, I was suddenly very focused on the screen and did not notice that you had arrived. I am currently working on some, like, bringing actual mythology into the game. This will probably be a little bit. So we have an idea of the damage. We'll probably be adjusting these numbers in a little bit. I don't think it's going to do anything that will require a save, although I might change my mind in a bit. Might give it something in the domain of a fear effect. Let's see. Let's see. Special traits, actions, and reactions. Okay, so Banshees have a thing called Horrifying Visage. Let's see what that does. Okay, that sounds fair. We will change this around a bit. I have had an okay day. Yes, I know. Uh-oh. You're in my Discord. You're raiding my stuff. Screen. And we will go ahead and drop this stuff in here, which won't apply because this is from the Banshee, but it's the template we're following. Action. The unicorn can scream. All creatures within 60 feet who are not immune to fear must make a willpower save against a save DC of... What are we basing this on? Based on wisdom based. Or become frightened for 1 minute. A frightened target can repeat the saving throw on the end of each of its actions with disadvantage if the unicorn, if it is within the unicorn's melee reach. Sounds good. Works good, lasts a long time. And this does remind me, condition immunities, frightened. That is not how you spell immunities. No, it's just that this doesn't realize that immunity can be plural. Never mind. Effective hit points by 25%. Okay. Good. Speed. We will need to know how quickly this thing can move. Unicorns go 50 feet. Warhorses go 60 feet. I'm going to go with a warhorse. Speed 60 feet. Saving throw bonuses. Saves. Constitution +5. Wisdom +5. We'll leave it at that. Admittedly, those are the big ones. Okay, so now, gotta figure out that final challenge rating. Defensive challenge rating. Read down the hit points column of monsters. Find monsters' hit points. Okay, hit points 65. That would be challenge rating 1/2, kind of low. That at least is correct. So it looks like we got an offensive challenge rating of 1/2. Yay. Or defensive. No, that's the defensive, not the offensive. Defensive. Now, offensive. We're giving it 2 attacks per round. I have notes on it somewhere. I wrote this. Yeah, there we are. 2 attacks per round, d6 plus strength. That is 7.5. That's double it to 4, 5, 6, 7. So that brings it up to 7. Oh, wait. Neglected something. Might have gotten this part wrong. It has 65 hit points, but we're supposed to increase it by 25%. So it has 81 effective hit points. Brings it up to 1. Result is the average. 8. That comes out to a CR of 4. You know what? Plenty respectable. What we end up with... I mean, it's a low-level threat, but it is a rightly frightening one that can really pummel level 3 or 4 characters. So this isn't a bad low-level thing. Obviously, it needs to be, like, made prettier, but made our first monster in 5th Ed. I don't think it's a bad one. There are actually some additional steps after challenge rating that it mentions. Condition, immunities. Alright, skill bonuses. Survival. Wisdom-based, so that'll be +5. And perception, +5. Passive perception would be 15. And it has no languages. Alright, so, now we're done. Not a bad little monster. Enough to throw a group of unprepared PCs off balance and force them to struggle. So, why do you keep doing that? Creatures of the wild tend to be feral. No, they tend to be wild. Okay, come up with a better analogy. Alright, creatures of the wild tend to be uncontrolled, impossible to tame, the extreme example being the unicorn. They range from the silent stalkers to the vicious herbivores. The herbivores are often the most dangerous because while a carnivore will fight to eat, an herbivore will fight to defend itself. Difference leads to a different behavior pattern. Carnivores are more cautious about who they kill, whereas herbivores attack whenever they feel threatened. You know, when you're sitting there not thinking about what you're doing, right, not thinking about your creation, stuff will just pop in. And if you're anything like me, it'll get annoying if you don't address it. So I'm going to address this thing, not because it's where we are in the creation process, but because, yeah, it's become a thing. Identifying magic items. Or special items. Either way. All good. If you... Normally, identifying the properties of a magical or special item requires two ability checks. I think that's what the kids are calling them these days. In total, these two take 10 minutes and are completed simultaneously. This may change for large or sophisticated objects. First roll investigation at intelligence investigation. I think that's how it's parsed. I may be wrong. If you roll 14 or better, then you roll Intelligence Arcane. Note that the DC may be higher than 14. Or if you roll 14 or better, you get a result. Note that the DC may be higher than 14, but on a 13 or less, you Hello, Derek. How are you doing? Fail at identifying the object and generally cannot attempt it again. The DC for each roll is based on the rarity. So we'll say 14 for common, 16 for uncommon, 18 for rare, 20 for very rare, 22 for legendary. If either roll fails, but rolls greater than 14, rolls that should be 14 or greater, then you have identified the object incorrectly and get false information. Identify will provide an automatic success at intelligence investigation. Legend lore provides an advantage at investigation, an automatic success at arcane, and will provide additional historical information. I think that just about does it. You can cast both for an automatic perfect identification. Okay, done with that. Done. Let's actually do some what I would refer to as sideways development. Develop what we expect to see in the game, right? How would a scenario work out, let's say? The first is the PCs find out something is wrong. This is going to be very basic and will probably be revised several times. Typical scenario outline. This kind of thing will probably turn out to be very basic, but it might also reveal stuff. So this is a good thing to do, right? What does the scenario look like? Something is wrong. I'm just going to leave it like that. It's a very common thing in horror that you're not actually trying to create anything. You're just trying to prevent change. PCs investigate. What do I do here? dress in makeup and scream at things that aren't there. Yeah, that would be live action roleplay. I've done that as well. Investigate. This may go to wilderness or settlement. Tracking and scouting. Settlement. Interview, investigation, planning, results, either dungeon delve or politics, payoff. Good raining day. Ah, fair enough. Payoff, either conflict or conflict resolution. Possibly big fight. Yay, D&D. Now, it looks like I've done nothing. I've done next to nothing, but this does indicate things that we need. There's a lot of investigating going on, for instance. Investigation will be a big deal. This may require us to do things like specifically set out what goes under investigation and what goes under perception, because that was never explained, and quite often DMs just go with perception. In settlement, when you're actually dealing with a problem, I see an awful lot of burglary. Burglary basically functions as a dungeon delve. A lot of it works a little bit differently because you're not dealing with monsters, probably not dealing with so many traps. It could in fact be more of a stealth mission than you're used to in D&D, but it plays off in much the same way. Same kind of checking for hazards, same kind of scouting, all of that. And if you don't mind the law coming down pretty hard on you, it might play exactly like your classic D&D dungeon delve. The politics would have to be... I don't know exactly how that would play out. Politics tends to work against the usual D&D thing, right? D&D is all about exploration and adventuring. And we have exploration, we have adventuring, we have roleplay and interaction in the settlements. Probably less so in the wilderness because there are fewer people to interact with. But there is exploration and investigation. There will probably be a few fights along the way. There could be a really big fight at the end, especially if you're dealing with an ascendant evil. The politics, on the other hand, I don't know. I don't know how that would be handled. I might just leave it. At this point, I'm just going to leave that there. But what we know that we will need: wilderness area to do. Wilderness areas of varying degrees of wildness. Right, some of these are going to be chock full of horrible monsters, some of them not so much. Probably a few areas with banditry going on, things like that. Urban areas of varying degrees of wildness. Also market, towns, villages, etc. Villages tend to feature less prominently. I would think that the politics are potentially influenceable by the players. This is definitely moving in the direction of something not... I wouldn't quite call it Game of Thrones-y, but something in that direction. And I would think that, political movements might actually be manipulated by the PCs, even if they aren't political figures, right? They don't have to be members of the gentry. They might just be... Actually, a great example I could think of is the Assassins of the Crusades. The Assassins, I have a video on YouTube about them, by the way. The Assassins weren't actually professional killers. They would kill people, but their actual purpose was to solve problems for their parent group, which would be the Nazari Muslims, with as little causing as little harm as possible. Not necessarily because they didn't like inflicting harm, although, you know, they were people, they kind of didn't, but because inflicting large amounts of harm led to blood feuds. So they rather solve their problems with as little harm as possible. So I could definitely see a PC, like, walking in to somebody who's created a problem, like who's becoming an obstacle, and doing what by reputation the assassins would do, laying out a plate of bread rolls and putting a dagger into their pillow before walking away unseen. The literal statement being, you can have one or the other, take your pick. Share the wealth or die with it. I comment in the video that I very rarely see the like actual interplay between the knight and the assassin. When anytime you've had a large order of assassins, they've been closely associated with a knighthood or something approximately similar. With the assassins, they were close allies of the Knights Templar. And yes, I reference Assassin's Creed even in the title of that video, because that's hysterically funny. Meanwhile, the ninja of Japan were closely tied to the samurai, right? They stood right next to each other almost constantly. You always see, if you see an order of assassins, you'll almost always see it associated with some kind of military lord. You'll need, NPCs and monsters might already be provided. We'll also need notes on uses for skills. The DMG, or the PHP does not actually provide a great deal of insight on how to use skills, I noticed. Which I'm not going to heavily fault it for it, because a lot of that is setting dependent. But I would think any setting would want to go into a bit of detail about how those skills work in that setting. Especially if you're going to heavily emphasize investigation, exploration, scouting, things of that nature. And this would definitely be a setting where scouting would be important. In fact, since I tend to run kind of a sandboxy game in the games that I run, it would be especially important just to know if the challenge is something that you can actually face. Because one thing about sandbox campaigns is that it's not necessarily like a world where everything immediately around the starting point is low level and it just gets progressively higher level as you go further afield. There's going to be stuff strewn about, and you kind of have to look ahead and see, okay, can we take that? It also becomes really important in sandbox campaigns to allow for alternate means of solving problems, which probably something. Provide alternate paths to solutions. I mean, it might not be quite so important to provide many different paths to solutions depending on your group, but in general, it is a good idea. Especially given that one path may fail, and if there's no alternate paths set up, what are they going to do? Right? Yeah, I mean, if the fail didn't end in a TPK, they might still be chomping at the bit and thinking, they threw us once, they're not going to throw us again, and they're going to look for some other means of approach. So always, I mean, as a general rule, you want to provide alternate means of approach. Not always to the point of being silly about it. Right. You know, if you're trying to invade a castle, castles are designed to not be invaded. It's okay to make a lot of those paths not necessarily impossible, but horrendously difficult to approach. But there should still be ways that you think through, and of course, the players are players. They're going to think of their own ways of approaching, and you might look at it and go like, "Holy crap! I didn't think of that." General rule is to let that play out, incidentally. if there's a possible way that it could go wrong, you could keep that there and see if it goes wrong. But don't punish players for coming up with neat, snazzy solutions that you didn't think of.